Welcome back to the big issue on CCTV and then also on Citi 97.3. My name is Godfred Akoto Boafo, trying to understand current economic situation, the current cedi depreciation this week rated the worst performing currency in the world. Also this week, finally got some feedback from our engagements with the IMF. What did they say? We'll try and understand. That's what we are trying to understand this morning on the big issue. I'm also trying to understand some of the things we've been told, of the global factors that have affected us. Were they solely responsible? Were the actions of or certain decisions or inactions of the government responsible for this? At the moment, we are hearing about speculators making a run on the economy. We'll try and understand all those things before the show ends today. And then also delve into this finance ministry statement and what the IMF is looking for us to do. And also some of the short-term measures. For instance, Guta went on a shop closing exercise this week. They suspended it after the government agreed to maintain forex rates at ports to aid traders. How does that affect prices? Will prices drop? Will they remain constant? We'll try and make sense of that. So let me come back to Joe. And don't forget, once we get to the medical side of this, we'll also be hearing from Dr. Kwame Sapon-Esiedu, who deals with the health side of things at the CDD, to discuss what is happening there, because there's a big issue there as well. So, Joe, I'm back to you now. And before we look at what we are doing to try and halt the spiral, if indeed we are halting the spiral, because it does not look like we are. Every week is one cedi more to what we used to pay for something. We've heard mention of do not speak about the currency. The more you talk about it, the worse it becomes. Speculators are playing a role in where we find the currency. Can you explain what is happening with that? Is that a legitimate concern? Okay. Okay.
Sorry, I'm not saying.
Okay.
How can you see this currency decline the way it has and say we should not talk about it?
But you've heard it. You've heard them say don't talk about it because it affects. It actually plays a role in making it worse.
But that's a ridiculous argument.
It holds no merit?
Yes. You see, remember, earlier in this program, we discussed about our downgrade, the cedi becoming toxic, the dumping of the foreign holders dumping the cedi for what do you call it? For dollars, exiting their investments in government bonds, etc. Inflation hitting us. You know what has happened is that literally, as a country, we have lost, the cedi has lost its role as a store of value. Think about it. If I had 600 cedis at the beginning of the year, and I was holding it in the bank, it was $100. Today, 600 cedis is $40, 15 to 1, from 6 to 1 to 15 to 1. It just tells me that I cannot, and in a country where we import everything, it means that 60% of my 60% of my purchasing power has been eroded. Will I continue to store my money in cedis if I have a way out? So all that's happening is that people are dumping their cedi positions and trying to get into dollar positions. And because there are no dollars to buy, right? Because we haven't suddenly increased the number of dollars we have in this country. If anything, it is getting worse because everybody wants to hold on to what he has. So now the situation is everybody wants to jump into dollars. There are no dollars. a simple economics 101, supply and what? Demand. So the few dollars that are available are going to the highest bidders at higher and higher rates. That's why you see us in this spiral.
Oh, okay. Okay. But yesterday we were told there's some $790 million from the Cocoa Board syndicated loan
that will come.
That is coming.
The challenge,
how would that help?
The challenge you have is that with the current mindset where everybody wants to jump out of CD positions into dollar positions, how long would that last? How long would that last?
So it's just temporary relief.
It will be temporary. You see, it will be temporary relief up until the point where we see that there is a significant movement to restore stability. That significant movement will occur possibly when we get the IMF deal done, or when the government shows clearly that it is going to reverse its mindset and cut expenditure in a significant way. That's when you're going to see stability.
Okay.
And
so speculators, it's not their fault.
It's not about speculating now. The people who are rushing into dollar positions are real people with pensions that are scared that their pensions are being eroded. They are real people who see the fall of the cedi. They see prices rising, and they see each day what's happening, and are scared. Why do you think there are speculators in this business?
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Now, the second one is something the Bank of Ghana had intimated they would do. I don't know if you followed up on it. This strategy to purchase gold, that was announced by the BOG in order to shore up the strength of the cedi. Unfortunately, gold has been struggling at the markets, for those who pay attention, for the past 2 weeks or so. So gold not really doing well. That's also not helping?
Not really.
Not really.
And the experience of other countries, and Zimbabwe comes to mind, of buying gold as a way of shoring up the foreign reserves. And the more reserves you are deemed to have, the better it is for your currency.
Yes.
Right? It has mixed reviews.
Okay.
It has mixed reviews. And really, the biggest issue now is the fact that the cedi has depreciated consistently since February. That nobody wants to hold the cedi anymore. Literally, it's toxic. It's caught fire.
Now, the question is how to let it stop.
Yes.
Which is what the Ministry of Finance is trying to do, because for this to stop, outside of they getting money, it doesn't look like there's any other way to let this stop. So they've been trying to get money, and they've given us a breakdown, some information about their engagements with the IMF. So it's a press release dated 21st October. I'll quickly go through it, the points, and it says that point 1, the annual meetings concluded successfully with a renewed sense of urgency for countries to rally together to bolster the global economy in light of the dim outlook for advanced and frontier markets alike. 2, the delegation also had several positive and encouraging engagements with the World Bank, bilateral partners, U.S. state officials, and external investors. 3, several meetings were held between the government of Ghana and the IMF, advancing negotiations towards a fund-supported program. 4, a clear path towards the final details of a program has been agreed upon by both parties, with the goal of reaching a staff-level agreement by the end of the year. 5, a pathway towards fiscal sustainability has also been extensively discussed, and the government of Ghana and the IMF remain fully committed to the goal of reaching a staff-level agreement on a program within the shortest possible time. And then 6, with this objective in mind, Negotiations will continue with the IMF mission team expected in Accra in the next few weeks. And the government goes on to thank the IMF, the World Bank, and their partners. And the ministry undertakes to continue to provide regular updates and further details of our economic program to the public immediately they become available. So there have been calls for. So your task is two things, Joe. There have been calls for, one, the president to speak or the finance minister to speak on this matter. We have a press release, and they say they'll continue updating us. I guess that should suffice. And then when you look at the press release in front of you, I guess the time frame is what matters most to us. Outside of that, what information do you get from this?
Well, I get one that is clear is the repeated mention of a staff level agreement.
By the end of the year.
By the end of the year, that sets you a timeline. So the program itself will not be signed by the end of the year like was initially intimated. But this really just says we are engaging.
It doesn't do much for us.
And goodwill. Well, at this moment, what do you want to see? Until an agreement is signed, we can only be engaging. And it has not been disputed. Remember that in other scenarios, whilst engaging, the IMF, for example, has come out at some point to say, I've suspended negotiations because we are not getting anywhere. Mm-hmm. So as far as this hasn't happened, and they say they are engaging and there's goodwill, we have to believe that and believe that the deadline of the end of the year of having a staff level agreement, which now will go to the board for approval, is still on track. That's fine. But you see, the man in the street, you and I, there are a number of things that worry them. It's not the IMF engagement per se. Their problems lie with the cedi, what is happening. What is happening to the cost of drugs? Inflation. What is happening to fuel? Right? Those are things that the man in the street faces. And as much as this is as best as we can expect at this moment, those issues have not been addressed. Who has addressed the issues that press us in a way? Maybe the governor has said one or two things. But from the Ministry of Finance, from the political leadership, this press statement does not make any difference to the man in the street. So I do understand when somebody says, can the president or the Minister of Finance come and tell us what is happening to us? Why the cedi is going this way? Why inflation is just rising and rising? Why things are so tough that traders want to shut up? Why is it that the pharmacist says we won't accept Ghana Health Insurance, we won't accept even private insurance? Those are the things that concern us. And nobody has addressed this in a certain way. So I do understand, and I do, and I appreciate, and I align myself with that. Maybe it's time for someone senior in government to address these concerns because they are pressing.
But somebody will say, well, what would that do? Would that halt the slide?
No, it doesn't mean it to halt the slide. When I'm father of a family, when things are going bad, I speak to them. I tell them. I may even say I can't do anything. I may even say things will get worse before they get better. I will, but you have to offer an understanding. You have to offer empathy. You have to offer hope. So the fact that nothing will change doesn't mean you should engage.
You should not engage.
Nothing. Listen, I work in Dalex Finance. Mm-hmm. I have over 3,000 agents all over the country. These are turbulent times. I was in Kufridua yesterday to engage with my agents in the Eastern region and the Volta region. And we talked They express views, what is happening, explain things. I engage not because I have a solution. Do you think I went to engage because I could tell them that the cedi will stop declining on this date or this date? I don't. But as leaders, we have a duty to engage. We have a duty to offer hope. We have to inspire.
And you're not getting that at the moment.
Not really.
Let me bring in Professor Tapepra as we discuss solutions. Prof, so we've heard from the Ministry of Finance who are engaging the IMF. From your end, does it look like bar this IMF bailout one way or the other, there's nothing else that can be done until IMF comes in? We are just waiting.
Thank you very much. IMF has always been the solution in times like this. It is like when you are diabetic. Consider a diabetic patient who has to inject insulin every morning. After the insulin has lost its potency or finished working, the sugar level rises up. So the $2 billion that ECF that we are going for is like artificial insulin that will support the dollar for a short while, a short period of time. It is good, but that is the way to go. We're in a critical condition. But I tell you that the Ghanaians should expect worse situations than this as we approach Christmas. Because per the way we see things, it is not like we are not too sure when we're going to get the money from IMF. You know, the agreement has not been finalized yet. Negotiations are still ongoing. Documentations are ongoing. So you can imagine what we'll be going through from today up to the end of December and probably the first month of January of 2023. So that's the way to go. Well, there is something I wanted to say, but I'm careful when I want to talk about change.
Don't worry. Just say.
Let's look at Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Sri Lanka's economy has been downgraded so that they can access concessional loans. You know, when you are a lower middle income country, you cannot access concessional loans. So I've been asking myself, I remember we had opportunity to go for this ECF some time back, but that didn't materialize. So can we consider downgrading our economy? In principle, we have been downgraded already.
Well, when you say, can we look at downgrading the economy, what exactly do you mean? I get the analogy, but for the purposes of our viewers and listeners, if you can explain a bit more.
I hope no one will take me on by...
Oh, no. I mean, it's an important point you have made, looking at the Sri Lanka example.
Yes, I'm saying that, you know, we rebased our economy in 2006, and that brought us to a lower middle income status. So can we go back to a lower income? Can we go back to where we were before 2006, before rebasing, so that we can qualify for concessional loans? Concessional loans are cheaper. Concessional loans the conditions there are more favorable compared to extended credit facility. Or, you know, extended credit facility are for budget support, restructuring of our balance of payment, and other things. So I've been asking myself, can't you be humble and then say, come and downgrade us so that we qualify for a better facility? Because some rating agencies have further downgraded us, whether we like it or not. The economy has been downgraded. So that is one option. Forgive me for this suggestion. But
I find it an interesting one, and you're not the first person I've heard intimate this, because there are those who have also said that this current global financial situation seems there are certain economies who are benefiting from this.
Sure.
So, like Brazil and co, who would perhaps even be in the same. Some of them are supposed to be in the same bracket as us, but we are supposed to be in that bracket, but we don't seem to benefit. So
sure.
It looks like we are just that economy in name, but not in practice.
Technically, and that has what has kept peace in the negotiations far too long. You see, that has what has kept these negotiations far too long. But you see, we need a more sustainable way of, making the economy strong. These are short-term measures.
Mm-hmm.
You see, we need to understand that the IMF, ECF, will never take Ghana out of this problem. But it is a necessary condition, but not sufficient condition. We need it for now. We find ourselves in critical condition. We need it. It's necessary, but not sufficient. Because we have gone to IMF so many times. So if IMF, ECFs were the antidote, why are we still going there? And going to IMF is not bad, just to address some short-term challenges. But we need a more sustainable way of approaching this issue so that we don't go there again. Opposition will always say that it's not good to go to IMF. But when they come to power, they go to IMF. And this applies to both parties, NDC and PP. We have all said it before. Okay, so the more sustainable approach is, what do we do to boost our reserve? I've been asking myself, that do we have that 3 months import cover? It is something that we have never thought about it. But I always ask myself, hey, Ghana, do we have that 3 months import cover? So if there is any shock, like, excuse my language, what is happening in Ukraine, if it were us, how will we survive? Do you have that 3 months import cover? So a more sustainable approach is to ensure that we do everything possible to boost our revenue reserves, productivity, output, agriculture. What can we do to increase our reserve base?
But what there are those who tell you, well, we've had planting for food and jobs, agric, as you mentioned. Industry, we've had one district, one factory. All these are supposed to boost the economy for moments like these.
Why are we not benefiting? Why are we not reaping the benefit? There are missing links. Until we delineate the politics from some of these, programs, we can never reap the full benefit. Where did 1D, 1F go? Who are the beneficiaries? What kind of monitoring and evaluation programs were put in place to monitor the effectiveness, evaluate, the implementation of such programs? What are we doing to ensure that the leakages, we fix all the leakages? Tax revenue generation capacity, one of the least in sub-Saharan Africa, Ghana. Our tax revenue generation capacity is among the least, one of the poor performing in sub-Saharan Africa. What are we doing to ensure that all revenue that's supposed to go to the government goes there? There are a number of loopholes in our tax system. We need to restructure the tax laws. We need to ensure that whoever is doing business is paying taxes. There are so many leakages. These are some of the sustainable ways that we can put in place to ensure that there is continuous generation of revenue that will become self-reliant. Again, Christmas is approaching. Everybody's thinking about traveling to China, US, Europe to bring goods. Is it possible for government to place a ban on importation? Outright ban. Because, like I submitted earlier, imported inflation is contributing so much to the inflation component of this country. And food inflation is also a problem. So if we're able to produce enough, if we're able to consume what we produce, if we're able to domesticate, we will not be dependent on imported food items. Then the dollar, the city will gain some strength against the dollar. It is a mere demand and supply issue. So government pegging the port rate against the interbank rate, for me, I see it as a fiasco.
Really?
It may not work. Of course, it may not work. It may, you see, in theoretical terms, you see it as a nice thing. But in practice, no. Because people are demanding the dollar. People are demanding the dollar. There's high demand for the dollar. People are traveling abroad. People are now preparing themselves to shop abroad for Christmas goods to come and sell. So that alone will not suffice. Is it possible we can place a ban on importation of some essential commodities? Some, not essential per se, but some traditional commodities like rice, those that we consume in larger quantities. Is it possible? We can do that. But the other side of it is that if you place a ban on it, what are you going to eat? So planting for food and jobs. Yes, there have been some achievements. But why are we so suffering? Why is food prices going up? A more sustainable approach to this problem is very, very critical.
Thank you very much, Professor Tapepra, coming in with some interesting nuggets there. Dr. John Osai Kwapon, just hold on for me because Mr. Jackson has to leave, so I want to give him the time that I've given him for the final round now so that he can depart, and then I'll spend the rest of the time with Franklin, Prof, Dr. Kwame Sapong-Esiedu, and then Dr. John Osai Kwapon, so do forgive me on that. So, Joe, you've heard Prof. He's already touched on the point I was going to raise in the third phase, where I was going to ask about, is it time to bring in some level of protectionism into the market? We've seen, sometimes I always say, Nigeria is like a place that interests me because it's a lot of good and it's a lot of bad. And they specialize in moments like this, telling you that, okay, it's okay, don't bring this into our country right now. When we finish doing our business, we'll come and check up with you. It's something we struggle to do here. Is it something that we should be looking at?
I'm not sure that's the route to go.
Okay.
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
And today I've taken away a beautiful analogy that
from
Professor Atapepra said. He says the Bank of Ghana is holding a mop, cleaning a slippery floor with its monetary policy. But the Ministry of Finance is actually the one pouring water on the floor with its fiscal policy. You see, everything boils down to two things. You have to cut expenditure and increase revenue. When you do the two, things will start to, you signal to the market, right? And things, you would even be able to cut a deal with the IMF. At the moment, we're still not sure what exactly they mean by the path to sustainable debt. But I can tell you what I think. That you see, when you look at the profile of our expenditure, there are two big line items: salaries and the servicing of debt.
You can't touch salaries.
You can't touch salaries. So what will you touch? The servicing of our debt. Who can you negotiate with and bring your will to bear upon them? Domestic holders of your debt. So, I believe strongly that there has to be a haircut it is going to be painful. It is going to be unfair. But that's the only way in this crisis we are going to bring our debt into a sustainable path.
That's the market you play in.
That's the market I play. Will I take pain? Yes. I will take pain.
But it will be interesting to know what the SEC says about all this.
It will be interesting, but the point is this, that otherwise, what are you going to cut? In truth, we all demand that they should cut the size of government. We all demand that they should cut the number of ministers. And I agree with that, because that also indicates that you, the government, are sharing in the pain. Côte d'Ivoire, in similar circumstances, cut down the number of ministers significantly. Ghana has not done that. That is symbolic. That is good. But you've got to cut expenditure. And the symbolic ones will only cut from the fringes. Think about it. Middle of the year, a review was done, and there were some measures to cut expenditure, right? 30% cut in salaries, no fuel coupons, this, that, and the whole. Do you know how much was cut? A total of 3.5 billion. 3.5 billion out of an expected budget of 100.5 billion. So less than 5%. 3.5%.
Roughly, yeah.
That's insignificant. Because the big value items were not touched. Because we have some sacred cows that we cannot touch. If you want to stop the water pouring on the floor, cut expenditure. If you want to restore confidence in the cedi, cut expenditure. And not just cosmetic cuts. Deep, wounding, unfair, painful cuts.
I have a feeling the IMF will be suggesting these cuts.
I suspect it's going beyond suggestion. Because when you take when you take anybody's expenditure and you want to say cut, you start from the biggest line items, and you start because they will have the biggest effect. So there we are.
The things we asked you to cut that you didn't cut. Now somebody will tell you to cut if I give you money.
You know, when we refuse to discipline ourselves, the world will draw a line around our behavior, and that line will be narrow and painful.
What are your thoughts on Prof's point about perhaps
downgrading the we've been downgraded already. It's not an issue.
No, but what he's saying is maybe an official downgrade.
I don't think. I have no thoughts, neither here nor
because
there.
basically what he's saying is that we are a very poor man. We're a broke man wearing a very expensive suit.
Oh yes, because you know why.
So right now, just take off the suit and tell people you are broke.
We had an expensive suit because we were broke and we kept borrowing. So our lifestyle, they don't match with how much money we were earning. Now, they stopped lending to us.
Because they see the suit we are wearing.
Because they see
you're saying remove the suit and let them see that you don't have anything.
Possible. But I'm more concerned today now about cutting it. But you see, removing the suit is cutting expenditure. Removing the suit is cutting the expenditure and letting everybody see that life is hard. Unless we cut expenditure, we're not going anywhere. Unless we get to the point where instead of debating whether ministers should be changed, we debate how much ministers should be removed and never come back.
Interesting points.
We are not getting where we need to go.
All right. Joe Jackson, Director of Business Operations for Delex Finance. So now let me come into Dr. John Osai-Kwapo, and Joe Jackson will be taking leave of us. He has another appointment. Thank you very much, Joe. Dr. John Osai-Kwapo.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm sure you've heard the interesting suggestions that have come up. Your thoughts on this IMF engagement, where we are with it, and whether in analyzing the Ministry of Finance's statement and also the IMF's own statement this week, it gives you a fair shake of where we will be at the end of the year. Will we get money or not? And this coming in of some $790 million from the first tranche of the Cocoa Board money, how much relief should it give us as we await proper relief? And then your other thoughts on solutions, also maybe comments on, I am very interested by Professor Atapepere's suggestion of how the 1D1F PFJ, which was supposed to perhaps be our buffers at this crucial time, have not seemed to help. And also, time to just say, look, we are not this economy, we are that economy. So give us money for cheaper, rather than this kind of money. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So let me start with the issue of the IMF engagement. In the course of the week, I had an engagement in which I talked about the fact that I was wondering if we were going to hear anytime soon from the Ministry of Finance, because I felt there was some sort of a gap where we were not getting any either communication signals or any policy signals that says we do recognize what is going on and this is where we are. And I put that within the context of when we first announced that we were going to seek an IMF bailout. The Ministry of Finance quickly put together a frequently asked questions with answers, which I thought was a very good way of communicating with citizens. It listed a number of issues in there. Why are we doing this? What would be the effect? What would be the consequences, etc., etc. It's a very detailed document, but I just felt that post that there seemed to be this gap where you kept wondering, is officialdom aware of the way things are going? Are we going to hear from anybody, etc., etc.? So in a way, I am somewhat relieved that there's been a communique from the Ministry of Finance, at least to give us an update on where things stand. I know these negotiations take quite a bit of time, but the one thing that I've been also curious about is, what are the sticking points, right? Are there some really tough issues that still needs a few more rounds of negotiation for both the IMF and the government to come to a final agreement so that we can get a deal? I am not privy to any inside information, but I would really like to know what the remaining sticking points are that is still requiring a few more talks, a few more conversations, and a few more negotiations before we can get a deal. Even if we get a deal, so from the statement, the projection is that they are hoping that by the end of the year, we'll be able to get a deal. Even if we get a deal, it also doesn't mean that once you get the deal, you get all of the money that you're seeking for, right? It's given to you in tranches based upon meeting certain benchmarks along the way. But I'm hoping that we will be able to strike a deal that would, give us the incentive probably to make some really difficult choices in exchange for getting the IMF support, so we can place ourselves on a path of recovery. So that's the IMF piece. Between now and then, it seems like the policy approach is we should ride out the storm till something concrete is secured. And for me, then riding out that storm also says, well, what does it mean then for the everyday trader, the everyday importer, the everyday business person, the everyday Ghanaian citizen, right? Especially if you look at it from the point of view of the exchange rate. Our exchange, the exchange rate is built into quite a number of pricing formulas, for example, on petroleum products. So how is that ultimately then transferred to the consumer? In relation to that, on the exchange rate, then, even if you look at the interbank daily rates from the BOG, you still see that sort of upward trend in terms of the dollar against the cedi, even from our central bank. The finance minister said something in the course of the week when he was asked about the situation, where he said he finds it perplexing. He talked about, the things that normally would come in to help shore up the cedi a little bit. And I've also been wondering about that in terms of, okay, so we announced the $750 million facility. I think it was from the African Development Bank sometime a couple of months ago. It didn't make much of a dent in terms of taming the exchange rate. Normally, when the cocoa syndicated loan is secure, even the announcement that we've been able to secure the cocoa syndicated loan, you would see some taming of the currency market in terms of the exchange rate. This time around, even the announcement of that almost 1.2 billion facility didn't seem to shake the currency market in terms of taming down the rapid depreciation of the cedi. So then you also ask yourself, there has to be something more than just these inflows of dollars that we need to give us a stable currency. And I'm not an economist, but I think that it really boils down to a simple matter of demand and supply, right? That the demand for the dollar is strong and it's not matching the supply. And simple, economics 101, from what I recall from my undergraduate days, says part of that then is going to push exactly what it is that we're seeing. So then should we, as you put it, we are a poor man wearing an expensive suit. So should we go back to the reality of saying we truly are a poor man? It would mean that, I think if I understand Prof. Pepra very well, it would mean doing another rebasing, right? So we rebased, and it put us within a certain income bracket. Does it mean that we are going to do a rebasing of the rebase to bring us down into a position where we can now access the concessional loans that Prof was describing? For me, when one of the rebasings was done and it showed that we had a much lower debt to GDP ratio, I remember saying to myself, I am concerned that it would provide us with a perverse incentive that says now we have a much bigger room, we have a much bigger fiscal space, we can go on and borrow because all of a sudden our debt to GDP ratio came down to, I think, about 50-something%. And so that perverse incentive now says, 50-something% debt to GDP ratio, we're in good shape, we can go and accumulate a little more debt because now we have a much bigger fiscal space. For me, when all is said and done, whether it's riding the storm, whether it's waiting for the IMF bailout, I still think that we need some really strong policy signals from the government. Hopefully, we would get that when the 2023 budget is read. I'm guessing sometime, November.
What can you look into a crystal ball and say this and this is what would be done?
Well, I think the record, from what you keep reading and hearing, in the public spaces, in media reports, hopefully we would do something about debt and debt sustainability. Hopefully we would also do something about the expenditure side of the budget, right? That hopefully there would be more direct policy signals and actions from the government that says, look, these are the specific steps that if we take would put us back on a path of recovery. And I'm looking forward to the budget between now and when we secure an IMF deal and what those details would entail. Hopefully the 2023 budget will be one of the clearest signals in terms of what the government plans to do. I know we talk a lot about looking at the expenditure side of the budget, given the budget deficit that we face. But I also ask myself, even if you halted all government flagship programs, that's just 9 billion of the 40-something billion hole that we were expecting in 2022, which means that are you going to then move into the territory of looking at mandatory spending and doing something there, which becomes extraordinarily politically difficult to do, right? You can't touch wages and salaries, or there's a serious political risk that comes with touching wages and salaries. You have to pay the interest on your debt, right? So how do you find ways to really restructure that and deal with that? For me, it seems like there are no easy choices or easy options facing the government. But that is also the mark of true leadership, that in times of crisis, you're willing to make the difficult choices that needs to be made so that it puts your country back on a path, on a path of recovery.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. John Osai. Kwapo, I have one other question for you, but I'll ask that question after I return from my break. I also have a lot of messages that I'll be taking. So keep watching The Big Issue on Citi TV and listening on Citi 97.3. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Big Issue. Let me take a couple of messages. Well, let me just ask Dr. John Osai Kwapo my question, then I will look at the messages that have come through 0549 986 996 and 0550 585832. Now, Doc, your quick thoughts, though, on Prof's rather interesting proposal on maybe it might be also time to become a bit more inward-looking to stem this tide of the dollar going up.
And I think he talked about ban on importation or
of some essential goods, if necessary.
Some essential goods, so that we can, because we have these domestic initiatives that we're trying, planting for food and jobs, one district, one factory, right? These are domestic initiatives that if you exercise that option of banning importation of certain key goods that we import from outside, then there has to be that domestic capacity to be able to meet that internal demand. And for me, I think it's an idea that has some merit to it, if ultimately that would insulate our economy from some of these exogenous shocks that we tend to experience every time that something is happening externally.
All right, let me just take the messages now, and then I'll bring Franklin in. And then also Dr. Kwame Sapong Esiedu, because this week we received a rather worrying missive from the Ghana National Chamber of Pharmacy, the Pharmaceutical Association of Ghana, Pharmaceutical Importers and Wholesalers. They were having problems, and also some health service providers have also spoken on what the economy and the currency is doing to their business. But some messages. Selassie in Tema says, my view about the finance minister's assertion that a rush for the dollar to import for Christmas is to blame for the woes of the cedi is disingenuous. This rush for dollars to import goods happens every year. Every year the craving for the dollar happens, and does indeed puts pressure on the cedi. But that pressure has never, in the history of this country, not even in our worst of times, like the early 80s, caused the cedi to depreciate so fast in 2 to 3 days. From 11 cedis after having come from 6 cedis in a couple of months back to 14 cedis in just a matter of less than 70 hours is unheard of. Face the fact. People who can are fast taking their money out of this country. Investors are trooping out like there was a war just because our outlook is so terrible. We were downgraded almost to junk status. Then those who can't take their money out are seeing their invested capital erode by very huge percentages through no fault of theirs. Not because of any bad investment decision, but simply because the value of their cedi is in dollar terms not the same as it was just a week prior. Then you factor in our interest rate and inflation, and their capital is almost wiped out overnight. So to save themselves, they change the cedi into dollars and keep and puts more pressure on the cedi, so those who have dollars stand to gain. But let's face it, The biggest contributor to the two problems mentioned above is the country's debt crisis, which presents a looming catastrophe for our economy. That's why investors are leaving in droves and capital is eroding fast. To say it is the Christmas rush is just pure dishonesty, in my view. If you don't recognize what the problem is, you can't prefer solutions. This is really, really good from Selassie in Tema. This one says, good morning, Godfred. I can't explain why the economy is failing or the government is crying that there's no money. But I also don't understand how there can be no money if at this time we are still sponsoring the Black Stars to go to Qatar. I hope the government is not sponsoring supporters groups like they did. We don't want to see any sports ministers crying on national TV. This one says, good morning, Godfred. This is Joseph Mormon from the USA. I am not sure many families are going to put enough food on their tables for this coming Christmas and New Year due to the high inflation and the poor economy. Until Ghana gets rid of her trade deficit, meaning creates more jobs, focus on more exporting than importing to allow the economy to boom or else, I'm not sure the economy will be stable. This one also says, an important factor in Ghana's economic crisis is the deregulation of the economy and its financialization, which began in the 90s under the SAPs. This has continued unabated. Structural transformation of the economy, but cannot be realized with one, a commitment to MNCs being able to repatriate 100% of profits. Two, attempts to deepen industrial agric and its dependence on fossil fuel-based agric inputs. And this is a question that he wants answered. So I will throw that question out. But Franklin, I'm sure you've heard also the suggestions that have come in on what we can do going forward. And you've spoken significantly about some of the things that need to be done. But your thoughts on some of the proposals that have been discussed this morning?
Well, first of all, the issue about trying to hold the currency in abeyance, as in trying to fix the currency for a segment of the market is not sustainable.
Yeah, Prof says it won't work.
Well, definitely won't work. In fact, if Joe Jackson was still in the studio, I would have reminded him of what his friend, his colleague Ken Thompson has always said, that the cedi should be allowed to fall to its normal level. And I think there's some wisdom in that. And the wisdom is that clearly your currency can only get stronger if the domestic, structures are able to help shore it up. And by that, what do we really mean? I mean, if you're able to build on the initiatives like Planting for Food and Jobs, 1D, 1F, and they were really viable and had their own qualitative outcomes, somehow the city would not suffer the way it suffered as we speak right now. You know, there's been some suggestions that maybe, I mean, Prof. Pepper suggests that we probably should downgrade the economy to a level that would require, basically tell people that, look, we are truly, really poor. And that reminds me of an article the finance minister wrote when COVID was raging in the Financial Times, suggesting that the countries that were less blessed with resources, like lower level, lower developed countries, who were given some sort of respite by the financial institutions, same should be extended to Ghana. And some of us were wondering that, I mean, those countries really are at the lower ranks of poverty, really. But we have the opportunity and we have the largesse to spend on items that we shouldn't be spending on. Essentially, the point I'm making is that even if we're required to be downgraded, the behaviors that mimic someone who is essentially poor and indeed, should I say, irrational, unfortunately, is not within our realms at all. And I think a lot more thinking has to be done when it comes to issues about proper expenditure, or proper preservation of good governance when it comes to deciding on how our resources are used. I think, clearly speaking, the conversation about what to do even after having an IMF deal, and by the way, I'm not entirely, we shouldn't be entirely surprised if we got a deal probably in December or early next year. Don't forget the current IMF boss is a friend of African finance ministers. When she had troubles at the World Bank, African finance ministers supported her, but she countered that support rather strongly. So I'm just making should I call it some sort of political analysis here?
Oh, certainly, there's room for that.
Yeah, there's room for that. So it also should be expected. But the fundamental issue really would have been, or would be, how do we essentially behave after having an IMF program? And I think we can take a lesson from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka just decided, I think this week, that they were going to limit the powers of the president. I mean, the powers that allowed the carnage to have occurred in the first place, the carnage of grand corruption, the carnage of appointing anybody into any office at all, the carnage of essentially being wasteful. I think if we started thinking in those terms, then maybe our politics will start getting refined. And that redefinition or refining we can see in the kinds of projects and programs that are thrown to attacks during elections. Maybe if we don't have that, maybe what we can do is to have the both political parties move motions in parliament to ensure that at least we have some level of some entity that reviews government projects, programs, and policies, some sort of an assessor general of sorts. Because the rate at which we are going, even if we get out of this hole, I'm sorry, we'll go back to our old ways. And maybe that is what the Fiscal Council was supposed to do. Let's strengthen it, give it the power to be able to independently verify, monitor, and evaluate programs, policies, and government so that we do not get ourselves into this hole, whether ever again, really.
But just a quick one there, since you also have your ears on the ground most of the time. This 5-member committee that was set up to discuss domestic debt restructuring and its ramifications or the potential of it with stakeholders. How has that been going? Because consumers, on the other hand, are saying, well, we are not getting we are not hearing much. And looking at the potential of getting a deal by the end of the year, it means these arrangements could come into play very, very soon.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that the committee has its own terms and they are supposed to be dealing with the domestic side of issues, which everybody who has spoken about this matter or who is closer to the matter suggests that you need to start with the domestic, should I say, debt restructuring processes. It will serve the government a lot of use or purpose if they are able to tell us exactly what has been achieved. I don't know what the modus operandi for this, should I say, the scope of the mission scope essentially is. The way they are going about it, I don't have any clues at all, but I think we have an idea that it will definitely involve some sort of haircut, which Joe Jackson believes in, and I think somehow has even started occurring in the first place. If you put your ears to the ground, some of us have heard that some bondholders, especially contractors, are being asked to take a haircut. I mean, you'll be told that the value of your contract is about 100 million cedis, all right, but we will give you 80 million. And the 80 million may not even somehow be available. So now you start looking at people who can actually get you the money quicker. And then you may then want to talk to some people who can get the money for you quickly. And that will mean also depressing the value of your contract by probably 10%. So eventually you may end up getting about 60 to 50 million out of 100 million Ghana cedis. I'm just saying that this is what I've also been hearing on the ground. So the haircut has been happening. It has to be officialized. But even as it is being done, you can be sure that there could be people who would benefit from the system as well. So, never crisis moment give opportunity to people to take advantage of the system as well. So it's already started. We only need it to be officialized, and then we get to know the extent to which the extent to which the cuts will go.
Okay. So I want to add a new leg to this, the health side of things. So this week, like we said, we've heard from Guta, for instance, and they got an outcome. So the government is promising to maintain forex rate at the port to aid traders. We've heard Professor Atapepe's opinion on that. But this week as well, we heard from the pharmacy side of the economy. Sorry. And by that, I mean the chamber, the manufacturers, importers as well. They issued a statement, and it's something that Dr. Kwame Sapong-Esiedu, who's a pharmacist and a research fellow of CDD, had intimated about earlier. He had written about this happening very soon. And then we got this statement about 3 or so days after his article on they need to watch what the current economic crisis was doing in the health space. So, and everybody goes to the hospital. And you can't predict when you go to the hospital. Everybody takes drugs of some kind. So what's happening basically, according to them, is that, for instance, from the chamber, the manufacturers and the importers and exporters, they are saying the exchange rate is a problem. And so the statement says that over the past year, the exchange rate of the cedi to the dollar has risen from 5 cedis, 80 pesos, to 13 cedis, 90 pesos, and it still continues to rise. This means that importers of finished pharmaceutical products, manufacturing inputs and equipment for pharma operations will need more cedis for their operations. For example, if 580,000 Ghana cedis was needed to import a consignment of medicines, which cost $100 as at the end of 2021, 1.3 million Ghana cedis will be needed to buy the same consignment of medicines today. So an extra amount of 810,000 is required as top-up over last year's money. This confirms the ravaging nature of the cedi devaluation and its direct impact on pharmaceutical operations. They talk about payment terms. The pharmaceutical industry is credit-driven. Public sector pays on the average between 6 and 12 months because of delayed payments from their National Health Insurance Scheme. Majority of private sector facilities make payment for all supplies within 3 to 4 months. In the current circumstances of daily devaluation of the cedi, it is imperative to state that pharmaceutical supplies on credit under these terms has led to erosion of operational capital of pharmaceutical importers and manufacturers. Inflation, they talk about the current inflation rate that stands at 37%. They talk about interest rates on loans contracted from commercial banks as at end of last year, which was approximately 27% and currently stands at 35% on a compounding scale. Talk about fuel prices. The cumulative fuel price increase from beginning of the year till date stands at 71%. Typical public sector business always has a caveat of last mile delivery, which means that suppliers are contract bound to deliver all orders to their respective warehouses, approved storage sites of the Ministry of Health, Ghana Health Service across the country. They talk about utilities. The cost of utilities, according to the PURC, has increased by 27% for electricity and 21% for water. We know about this one. And then they talk about the reversal of benchmark values and say that the benchmark value discount policy has also affected them. Means that importers of finished pharmaceutical products are made to pay 70% of applicable taxes on medicines instead of the 50% they used to pay. Interestingly, all these statutory taxes paid to government agencies are all paid in cash. So, what are they going to do? They are calling for an immediate action to save the industry, but their decisions are this: no credit policy for all buyers in the industry. All transactions with immediate effect shall be on cash basis until the economy stabilizes. And then their recommendations are that the NHIS and all private health insurance companies are encouraged to give accredited facilities seed funds to buy medicines on cash for supplies to patients under the schemes. All end-user institutions, that's retail pharmacies, private hospitals and clinics, are encouraged to secure loans from banks to buy medicines on cash. The Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning should release funds immediately to pay for the long-standing debts and to push to clear all overdue debt. The Ghana Statistical Service is advised to include medicines amongst the basket of items used for the Consumer Price Index calculations. Such an adjusted CPI will display a better inflation rate for planning and strategy for the pharmaceutical sector. And finally, the Ministry of Health, Ghana Health Service and NHIS should, as a matter of urgency, meet with the leadership of the above associations to discuss possible financial re-engineering to save the situation. Conclusion: The Chamber, the PMAG and PIW implore all stakeholders and the general public to understand and support this initiative in these trying moments to save pharmaceutical businesses from imminent collapse. So I come to Dr. Kwame Sapong-Asiedu, pharmacist and research fellow CDD, who had written about this happening way before it happened, and I'm saying this is not good news at all. Doc. Dr. Sapong-Asiedu, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes,
can you hear me?
This is grim reading.
Well, it's. I wouldn't say it's grim reading. I can see my colleague, Professor Senkwapo, laughing because if he would be candid with you, we started having conversations about the trend as far back as April at CDD. Yes, and
you should have told us in April instead of having the conversation. You have just told us.
No. Let me build something. So our first alert came out in June. We actually put out data in June to show the trends, and we actually suggested what could be done to ameliorate the problem. Then nothing happened. We then wrote again in August. This time, setting out why we needed an external pricing mechanism in the pharmaceutical sector to try and resolve this problem. Again, nothing happened. Then, 2 weeks ago, because we are collecting another set of data on the pharmaceutical sector, we realized that the prediction in August, as at August, the price change dynamics in the pharmaceutical sector was between 33 and 49%, and we said that wasn't sustainable. But the latest data coming, we're seeing that on average it's about 127%, with some around 270%. So again, I had the conversation with John. I said, this doesn't look good. And at that time, I did say that the only way the sector would be saved was to go cash and carry. Because if you look at the modeling and you look at our health financing and the fact that already 52% of the population pay for health services out of pocket, and the NHIS, if you look at their indicative prices, because the NHIS has a formulary through which it reimburses, their prices are 35% currently behind the market average. That said, they are owing people between 6 and 13 months, meaning that even if they pay them now for those goods at the rates that they were supplied, the people cannot restock. So it's a huge, mess, if I should put it that way, a huge mess that could clearly have been avoided. The sad thing is, if you read the statement from the chamber and you look at what they are suggesting now, that should have been done much earlier. Why do I say much earlier? Because a lot of the pharmacy supply chain is bankrolled by the wholesalers and importers. They give 30 days credit and all that. So the retailers are generally not going to the banks to take loans to buy these. And that therefore takes the bank rates on these pharmacies a bit lower. Currently, the bank rate is about 41%. So if you tell them to now go and raise capital, because if you say the NHIS should give them capital, it's not going to happen. The government just doesn't have the money. We all know that. If they have to go to the banks to raise capital, then automatically that capital would have to add on to the price transfer to both NHIS and to the end consumer, which is going to increase prices by at least 41%, because that is the bank rate currently. And it wouldn't be just 41% because they have to put their profit. No one treats as a loss, and the pharmacies cannot absorb these, hits. So we need to sit down and we need to have an honest conversation about the sector. That sector is, as of 2021, was about $690 million. It's growing by about 5.7%. So it's past $700 million now. We need to sit down and have an honest conversation. And why I say that, you cannot fault the chamber. We have two issues at the moment. If the chamber do not pull the brakes and they don't have liquidity, and the importers also don't pull the brakes and they don't have liquidity to pay their creditors abroad, what's going to happen is they are going to crash. If they pull the brakes like they've done now, and the retail pharmacies do not have the liquidity, that means there might be a supply chain glitch where there would be decreased stocks in the pharmacies because they don't have the cash to buy, which then might affect patient outcomes because prices will go up and patient compliance with their medication, especially for chronic diseases, would go down, which would mean their prognosis would go south. That is the whole thing that we were predicting as far back as April and June. But like I say, in this country, we don't listen until proverbially it hits the fan. And that's where we are.
But when you started picking this up, you said you put it out there. Did you make, for instance, the NHIS aware or the Health Ministry aware officially that this is the storm that is on the horizon and you need to take a look at this? Why would they underestimate the potential pitfalls that were ahead of us?
I don't know if you've seen a circular that was put out by the NHIS on the very day that the chamber came out. They acknowledge co-payment is on the rise, and they acknowledge that they have to start negotiating with the chamber. That was on the same day. I don't know if you've seen that from the NHIS. The other point is that when something is put out by civil society, it's put out on their websites, on their blogs and other things. You do not write to the people of issue. You just say, this is what's happening, because you are a civil society organization and you inform the general public as well as the stakeholders, and that is their approach. If you then get approached to try and input into policy, then you join in the input in policy, because if the government thinks that they have it under control, you cannot force yourself. So the answer is no. Nobody wrote directly to them. But the point is, the NHIS should have known that their formulary was negotiated last year and the prices were going up. They should have known that with the fact that they have their inflows are constant because of the NHIS law and they are not indexed to the dollar, if they open renegotiation for their formulary, currently their prices would go up by about 35%, which would mean that their drug bill would go up by about 35% with their inflows not changing, which would impact on them considerably. They should have known these things. I don't think anyone should tell them, if you are running an organization like that, you should also be reading the market. And so I struggle a bit that we've gotten to this point. But then again, I ask myself, do we listen in this country anymore? I doubt we do.
Let me ask a few questions of you. The statement ends by saying, all transactions with immediate effect shall be on cash basis until the economy stabilizes. What would be considered stable for the chamber, PMAG, and PIWA under the current circumstances we are in?
To understand how the pharmaceutical sector works for stability, there are three major indices and there are a few minor ones. There's the forex rate, there's inflation, and there's the bank rate. So for as long as the Bank of Ghana continues to increase the policy rates to try and quell inflation, and inflation is on the rise, and and the forex is also on the rise, there would not be any stability in the pharmaceutical sector. There would, because the sector is 85% dependent on forex. Yes, we manufacture 23% of our medicines in Ghana, but even then, close to 80% of the raw materials, the equipment, the fillers, you name it, the capsules, are all imported into the country. The pharmaceutical grade, they are all imported. They are not made in Ghana. So if the forex continues to go, there's no way the chamber would say that there is stability. That's not going to happen. And that is why, if you read what we wrote in August, we said that one of the quickest ways would have been for government to have targeted supply of forex to the pharmaceutical sector at a preferential rate. Because at the end of the day, like you said, health drives the engine of every economy by way of their human resource. An unhealthy human resource is an unhealthy economy. And so if this goes on, it's going to affect our economy adversely. And that was why we put out that. But unfortunately, We are here, and the government doesn't have the forex now, so we need to start thinking creatively around, do we have development banks, for example? The development banks, do they have the capacity to, for example, give the retail pharmacy, the end user pharmacies, loans at a lower preferential rate so that they can buy in cash? Are they able to find forex for the wholesalers and importers and manufacturers as well? We need to start having these hard conversations and nip this in the bud, because if we don't, the trajectory wouldn't be good.
Let me just ask you, what is the balance between the drugs that are manufactured here and those that we import? Although you've also alluded to the fact that we do import the components for even the ones that are made here. What are we looking at?
Yes, you're talking about 77-23.
Oh, okay.
Our local manufacturer is about 23%.
In the scope of global comparison, is that big or small?
In the scope of global comparison, we are in a very bad place, because if you look at India, it's 92.8. 92% of all pharmaceuticals made used in India are manufactured in India. You have a similar dynamic in Pakistan. You have a similar dynamic in Korea. Yes, when you come to the UK and Europe, because they are doing what they call, outsourcing their manufacture, even though technically you still say that those things are manufactured in the US or the UK, they have plants in India because cost of manufacture is cheaper, which are licensed by their regulators who manufacture specifically for these markets. So everyone has its pharmaceutical strategy. The question I keep asking is, what is Ghana's pharmaceutical strategy?
What is the potential for increasing those numbers? Is Ghana a good place for increasing those numbers?
Well, yes, I would say that Ghana is a good place. I mean, we have one of the best regulators in Africa, the FDA. We have a lot of manufacturing plants that have what is termed the WHO Good Manufacturing Practice Standards, the high ISO standards, because the FDA pushed them to do that. Then you look at the sub-region, and pharmaceutical manufacture is on the low in other countries in the sub-region. So we are in a good place. But the environment is such that the ingredients that go, is one thing invested in building all these plants and all other things and training the human resource, the pharmacists, pharmaceutical analysts, GMP specialists and all that. But if the stability to get the raw materials in and do everything is not there, then you're going to struggle.
All right, then let me catch up. Dr. Kwame Sapon-Siedu is a pharmacist and research fellow with the CDD. Professor Tapepa, are you still with us? Is Professor Tapepa still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Yes, I'm sure you've been following this part of the conversation and the imminent problem it presents to the economy, looking at what the pharmaceutical side is saying and what the economy is doing to them. So they highlight exchange rate, payment terms, inflation, interest rates, fuel price, utilities, reversal, and basically are saying that if you don't have money, actual cash, don't come and do business with them.
As for this one, I beg to differ with your opinion, with all due respect.
Go on.
So I would plead that the association takes a second look at this. But this is about health. This is about health. And so go back to cash and carry system.
But Prof, health is money, and the economy is not favoring them at the moment. All the things you spoke about affects them as well.
I agree with you perfectly, but that's not the way
it's already happening.
That is not the way to go, and that can't be the solution. Let's also think about the health of the people of Ghana. Okay, let's think about the health of the people of Ghana. So does it mean that now if the economy bounces back, now we can do business on credit? So by the time the economy, by the time the economy bounces back, Kenyans would have died. And who are you going to do business with? So this is an essential service. It's an essential service. It's about health. It's health matters. So let's find an alternative way of handling this issue. Again, you also made mention, your statement also made mention of the fact that BOJ should not use the monetary policy rate. I find that also not to be proper. I don't think that is.
No, I don't think I said the BOJ should not use the monetary policy rate. That is coming from the Chamber of Pharmacy.
Yeah, Prof. And just to be on the same page, Dr. Kwame Sapon-Siedu is not represented in this statement. He just focused. He works for the CDD. With a focus on this sector.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So one of the statement that you read was saying that the host, Mr. Host.
Yes, my name is Godfred.
BOJ shouldn't use the monetary policy rate. I mean, that is also neither here nor there, because that they are mandated by law, and that is the working tool for tuning the directing the economy. So I think let's find a better way of addressing some of these issues. I appreciate your concerns. Yes, we cannot collapse the pharmaceutical industry. We can't wait for the industry to collapse. In as much as we cannot wait for industry to collapse, we cannot also allow our well-meaning Ghanaians to die. So let's look for.
Let me give you an example of the current data that we are picking. So, for example, if you look at a tablet of paracetamol, which is one of the cheapest products you can buy in any country for pain, the price has gone up by between December and now by 141%.
Hey.
So how do you bankroll this whole supply chain? Because formerly what was happening was that the chamber was giving the credit to the, the retailers, and they were paying back over a period of time, 30 days. But because the retailers then are giving it to the NHIS, who are then paying back in 13 months, they are not able to, pay back at the guaranteed time because their money is locked up as well. What's then happening is that it's depreciating the capital for these manufacturers. So if we are not careful, the situation we're going to find ourselves in is if someone is manufacturing, say, 15,000 tablets a day of paracetamol, they'll suddenly find out that they manufacture 7,500, which would then give a market deficit. And if you listen to the statement they read, they say that the pharmaceuticals should be used as part of the inflationary basket. I still find it surprising that in a country where health of the economy is driven by the health of the citizens, pharmaceutical inflation has never been factored in. I quite remember when myself and John started having these conversations. That was one of the things we found shocking, that no one measures inflation in the pharmaceutical sector. Until the CDD decided that let's look in that area, nobody did, including the Ghana Statistical Service. In fact, the chamber started realizing when we started measuring it that this was going south. And if you speak to retail pharmacies privately, a lot of them have started trading at a loss. It is not great. No business model can run that way. And so I agree with you, Professor Prepra, that we need to find germane ways of fixing the problem. But the question is, what are the germane ways of fixing the problem? And would the most important stakeholder, which purchases 75% of our pharmaceutical supplies, the government, be ready to sit down and have these hard conversations? Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. And we need to be firm about them. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves in a situation whereby, health is well, and we are not having the robust, difficult conversations. And then the sector gets on its knees. And don't forget, it's happened in Ghana before. And the sector gets on its knees, and then we are running from pillar to post. And what will happen is it will affect the quality of pharmaceuticals, because nature abhors vacuum. The minute we have a glut, you get a lot of people bringing in fakes and counterfeits, and that would not be acceptable as well. So we need to see the scope of the problem, and we need to start fixing it accordingly.
Interesting thoughts. Let me come to John. Yeah. John, okay, Prof.
Can I chip in something?
Yes, please chip in, and then I go to Dr. Sekwapong.
Yeah, the solution is obvious. Let's go back to the budget. This should fall under the expenditure for the budget allocation for health sector. Mm-hmm. What is in there? What is in there in terms of pharmaceutical procurement? Ministry of Health. What is in there? So let's have healthcare financing plan. There should be proper healthcare financing mechanism, healthcare financing governance in this country. We need to meet government so that Ministry of Health, and let's have a proper layout, a proper, a plan that addresses healthcare financing issues. Other than that, those at the bottom of the pyramid are going to suffer. Remember, they constitute the majority. Your health is your wealth, and your health is development. Thank you.
And you see, Prof, before John comes in, and that is why I say we don't listen in this country. As far back as June, we suggested this, exactly what you said, that there needs to be an external pricing mechanism. Every country, even the US, the UK, has an external pricing mechanism for the financing of healthcare, so that they can have competitive pricing vis-a-vis the sector, also not being overpriced so that people cannot afford. We suggested this, and suggested it again in August. We are now here saying that we need to do that, and it's not in the budget. That is why I keep asking the question that at which point are we going to act? If the budget is not picking it up, statistical service is not picking it up, at which point are we going to act?
Dr. Sekwapong.
Yes, sir.
Yes, you are also guilty in this matter. You've been having this conversation in secret with Dr. Sapo Esedu. And here we are.
Well, so what my colleague and friend and brother Kwabe normally does is when he picks up on these data points, he gives me a call and he says, look, what sense can you make of this data? What is it saying to you? What are the implications of that? And I think I was also because it's not my area of expertise, immediately I was concerned by some of the very basic concerns that Professor Pepra also has, which is how do you balance the rational economic choices that the Chamber of Pharmacy needs to make, right? Because truly, they are not in the business of charity, right? They are in a business. They have to survive. They can't operate at a loss. They can't collapse. I mean, it's purely the economic rational, choices that they have to make. But Prof also raises a very important point, which is the humane side of things, right? That when you move to such an approach, then what happens to access to basic? I mean, for me, the other question I asked Pami the other day was, we are even talking about a basic pain medication like paracetamol, and the fact that over a period of a couple of months, you're seeing such an upshoot or an uptick in the price of paracetamol. So you also have to be humane. At the end of the day, then, how do you reconcile the humane part of you to ensure that people can get access to basic medicines, but also ensuring the economic survival of the very people who make sure that we have a healthy supply of these medicines within our healthcare system? And I think that's where the conversation that Kwame and Prof were having about healthcare financing and how we really deal with the governance of healthcare financing becomes a very important issue to address. But yes, for me, when you look at the numbers, it is very worrying to see the impact that it can have on basic access to very simple medicines like a painkiller like paracetamol. But again, everybody, given the economic times in which we are, I think everyone, every institution, every business is faced with having to make some very difficult choices, some of which would draw the concerns about the quote-unquote humanity of some of those choices. But that's the reality. That's the reality we face. It's really impacting everybody. And as I keep saying, I just hope that sooner rather than later, even if we have to keep riding the storm till we get back on a path of recovery, these are some of the unfortunate but difficult choices that we may have to deal with until we get it back all together.
All right, then, Dr. Jano Sai-Kwapong, thank you very much. We'll take another break. Franklin will come and speak on this, and then we'll just try and wrap up the whole economy conversation. The past 30 minutes, we focused on the health side of it and what the current credit crunch is doing to the pharmaceutical side of our existence. The big issue will be right back. Welcome back to the big issue as we enter the final. And Franklin, you've heard your two friends from the CDD on the pharmacy side. So the chamber, the importers, the producers, on what the economy is doing to their business and the decision they have taken that all purchases should be on cash basis and the recommendations that they have made. And I want you to add that to, again, that concern I had that I raised in the previous sector about most of these policies we had, particularly regarding industrialization, that were supposed to be our buffer or, fallback plan, at least to cushion us from external influences. But we don't seem to be feeling that. And by that I mean the push into manufacturing. So we had the 1D, 1F, the push into planting things that we could have grown some of these things here and given to the pharmacists, but now we have to bring some of those things in. It doesn't speak well of those policies, really.
Well, I guess it's, should I call it, there's a cascading impact of the current times we are in. And as my good friend Kwame has elaborated, I think the answer actually lies in exactly ensuring that there's proper economic development, and by which we can allude to some of the initiatives we've mentioned, as in proper anchoring of these initiatives. Let's be a bit fair though, and I think Kwame mentioned that as well. There's been some effort at ensuring that there's investment in the pharmaceutical industry in this country, and there are a few pharmaceutical companies that have managed to eke out some sort of investments, and they are doing quite well. In fact, within the sub-region, Ghana seems to be somehow the leading light in this regard. But these are baby steps, and even though I recognize that there's something significant that has happened, there's still significant mileage. There's still significant mileage to go. At the end of the day, the question is, what exactly would encourage people to come and invest in the sector? I recall somewhere in 2015, at the height of Doomsaw, there was a very big pharmaceutical company that had just established a vaccine plant in South Africa that was looking to expand into Ghana, that came visiting and asking questions about the economics of their investment. Essentially, how was it feasible for them to look into Ghana and also establish? And the consensus at the end of their visit was that it was very difficult at the time, given the economic indicators that were existent at the time. Question is, Have those multiplied after how many 7 years? Of course they have. So for me, at the end of the day, the only answer actually lies in ensuring that we invest in these critical sectors so that we can build a shield against some of these foreign or the exigencies that we have. There was a time when the argument was that these medicines, however imported or even domestically produced, were priced out of the reach of ordinary people because of the patent. But as Kwame will tell you, that argument at the time, some people at the time, including some of us, were arguing that, look, the challenge within the African continent or the developing world was just cost of doing business, the cost of production, and indeed the taxes that were even imposed on imported medicines. Now we are making a headway, even with some little manufacturing within the country, but then you have this other evil which is plaguing us. So it has to be dealt convincingly. But I suspect that the cash and carry basis, as Prof doesn't want to hear about it, it's essentially the case that, well, if you don't do cash and carry, at the end of the day, you can't even because you need to get the money quickly, race against the exchange rate, and then buy and restock. If you don't, there'll be no medicines left. And on that note, I am probably going to, I should know better, by the way, I'm some medication which has to be imported, and I better rush and get them quickly. Anyway, yeah, so depressing really, but we need to ensure that the right things are done. And I don't know, at this juncture, look, and government is playing a waiting game. In fact, there's nothing to be done apart from reassurance. And even though we are calling on the president to speak, it looks as if there's no plan. And we only need to ride the storm, as John has said. Probably just need to ride the storm until something comes out of the IMF deal, and quicker, sooner so.
But just to wrap this up on that, again, because you're all civil society players, the president's this push for the president to speak, for the president to speak, for the president to speak. There are those who say not really necessary, cosmetic perhaps.
Well, it may be cosmetic, but he shouldn't be telling people that his ministers are doing so well in the midst of atrophy. I don't think that's one of the things we want to hear. We don't want to hear that. Maybe the only thing we want to hear now is if he feels that there's going to be a definite time within which you clinch a deal, an IMF deal. I think that's the biggest issue right now, because when his finance minister speaks and says that God willing, we would get a deal by December, or by in fact, he said before the budget would be read. That was the initial he said.
That's a couple of days, not even weeks. That's a couple of days.
Exactly, and that's not reassuring enough at all. We need to move from the realms of the spiritual to the realms of the reality, because I think we've that department, God has forsaken us long ago, and I think we need to hear the president speak.
No, but when he speaks, I'm just saying, what do we expect him to say that we don't know already? What exactly? What the president should speak. The president should speak. What do we want to hear? That's my point. Nobody seems to be able to say exactly what the president is supposed to talk about.
Well,
no, they said that they should give us a definite timeline by which we'll get an IMF deal. I know it's not within his realms alone, but at least he gets daily updates as to what the negotiations are, how the negotiations are going. And since the IMF deal is the only deal in town right now, we should know exactly what dates we are going to get the deal, because that somehow begins to signal to everybody that, well, we are back in business, and that we may then become susceptible to some other funding from somewhere else. I don't know. Frankly, we've reached our wit's end, and if all the things we've said had been done, we probably wouldn't get to this stage. So maybe the president is alone on this one.
Kwame,
I struggle to see. I belong to the school of thought, which is, what exactly is he coming to say? And I come from this school of thought for one reason. We all saw the release from the Ministry of Finance this morning.
Yes.
And the level of ambiguity in the statement they put out. It is clear that even the Ministry of Finance is not sure when this is all going to end. And like Franklin said, the president is briefed on a daily basis. So if the people who are actually in the firing line of this negotiation, unless, of course, they are putting out statements unsure telling us, but telling the president definitively that, oh, we think this is going to end here. But then you see, when you work in civil society, you read between the lines as well. So then when you see the statement that was put out by the IMF on their own website,
yes,
and then you see further ambiguity there, that they are also not sure when this is all going to end, and you read between the lines and you see that they are basically telling us, show us that you can restructure your debts so that we give you money, because we are not going to put our money into a sinking ship. I mean, that is what they've written, but in sort of a roundabout way. If you are the president and you put these two statements together from the Minister of Finance, from the IMF, and then the World Bank compounds and say, actually, this wasn't what you should have come for. You should have come for this one, suspension, earlier, but you didn't do it. And then you're like, what exactly are you going to tell us? Unless, of course, it's reassurance. And sometimes when you are in a crisis, yes, reassurance is a good thing. That, oh, I'm with you, I understand the plight that you find yourself in. And though we do not know when the end would be in sight, we are working tenaciously to try and get to some form of closure. And we'll keep updating you. That, if that is what he's coming to say, that might be helpful. Apart from that, I don't know what he's going to say. And to be honest, in his recent utterances, the president has made it such that would people even be willing to listen because of what he said in Kumasi on 2 occasions. I don't know if you've been seeing the footage of people hooting at him. And I am one who believes that, yes, we might be angry, but that might not be the route to go down, the hooting and all that, even though, yes, I can understand that people are venting their spleen. So if you are the president and knowing that you go to Ashanti, which is your stronghold, and you are being hooted at, you go to your home region, Eastern, and you're being hooted at, would you want to take the national stage and think that you would get any different reaction, especially when you went to a program in Accra and got hooted at as well? So all these make me think, what is he coming to say, and how is it even going to go down? And then finally, you look at the response globally of investors in Ghana and the way they are going out. And even if you look on Bloomberg and other things, the way the cedi is falling, even against the pound that is struggling because of the mess from a trust, it's making an advancement against the cedi. That doesn't make sense. I can understand it if the dollar is making it, but the pound should not be going at the speed it's going because it is struggling globally as a currency. So you look at all that and you're like, well, what's this man coming to tell me anyway? And that's why I'm not too sure what, much as I would rather he spoke, I'm not too sure what he's coming to say.
But has there ever been a situation where the citizenry respond to that kind of verbal assurance from leadership?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, if you look at even the pound, the minute, irrespective of the fact that I disagreed with that decision by Liz Truss, Kwesi was kicked out and Hunt came in, and Hunt gave his first few public utterances and all that, you clearly realize that the slide of the pound, which had dropped to 1.07 to the dollar, 1.07 to the dollar, started coming up again. And then when Liz Truss resigned, it has stabilized. It's about 1.13 at the moment. So markets respond. What we are seeing in Ghana is not just down to it, and that's why when the president says that, oh, my ministers are performing excellently, but the market is telling you we are marking them as failures because the market is flying. So sometimes these are the utterances I'm talking about, that if he tones down, perhaps is more reassuring, the market might react differently. Because honestly, there's nothing that has changed between when Kwesi was there and when Jeremy Hunt was there, apart from the fact that he's been reassuring, he's reversed some of the things that the markets didn't want. and he said that they are going to be more fiscally prudent. With that, things are stabilized. We can do the same in Ghana. But I doubt if we can do the same with the same people in the driving seat, like the finance minister and all that, because the markets also respond to the personnel. And that is something that I think the president is ignoring, and that might come to hurt us.
Well, some people, I've heard people like Franklin say this, so I'm going to use that against him in this particular context, who says the markets do not respond to anything in Ghana. So it does not respond to the president, it does not respond to the... Franklin, you are laughing. You said it. It does not respond to the finance minister.
With a qualifier, what I said was that there are many people in government whose actions or inactions possibly would not even impact on the economy. It will not. Nothing would happen if some people did not go to work. People obviously there are many government parastatals that if they didn't show up at work, nothing essentially would happen to the economy. That's what I said. But of course, not to make a comment like sacking your finance minister. If you did sack, especially in this scenario, if you did sack, maybe there'll be some little movement in the market, right? Even though our situation is that bad. But if you make a major statement like, don't forget, was it the Nigerian minister who said something like debt restructuring? And the market immediately responded, and he had to correct his statement and say that he didn't mean that. In this volatile situation, any comment you make, including your minister performing rather extensively, will come back to bite you. But the market is also responding in that regard. But my point essentially was that there are people in the economy who are dead wood, that if you drop them, nothing significantly will change in the economy.
John, your thoughts on this whole president's coming? I've read comments like, for somebody saying things could happen if the president comes out and makes a definitive statement to encourage people not to even go and buy dollars. Perhaps that could stave off some of the slide that we are seeing, and that is why we need the president to come and speak, to come and make some kind of appeal to people in the market and say, look, you need to help us at this moment. Don't do this right now. Trust us and don't change your money to dollars.
Mm-hmm. So, as a student of public administration, one of the first things you also learn is that public administration is both a science and an art, right? The science part of public administration is the strong policy signals you send to market players, to players in your economy, the specific actions you take to deal with any major crisis that you face. That is the science part. But that doesn't always do it in terms of during certain crises. You also need the art part of public administration. And that is why, for me, I come from that position of saying, yes, it would be good to hear from the president, right? Because there's also something about the art part, the politics part of economic management and policy that also can help, either cool tempers, manage expectations, manage frustrations. Because as I've been saying, for me, the impression from where I sit, that vacuum that has been created was giving me the impression that it's either they've not heard, they've not seen, or they have heard, they have seen, but cannot necessarily be bothered, which may not be the case, right? And so in that vacuum, it gets filled with all kinds of narratives. That is why, for me, I would support the idea that it would be good for the president to speak directly to the nation, to show that, like I said, to show that, look, I understand the times in which we are. I understand the challenges that we are facing. We are working on this IMF deal, the 2023 budget, my finance minister and his team, something that gives you some sort of assurance that, oh, okay, you are just not you've just not tuned out Ghanaians. Now, as to whether it would have any, effect, as to whether people would tune in, as to whether people would listen, given the already, the place where they are feeling all of these pinches, is a different story. But for me, that shouldn't be the reason why the president shouldn't engage the citizens directly. I like the fact that in the beginning, the Ministry of Finance put out those FAQs, like I said. And I think some of those sort of regular public engagements, I think has a way of dealing with the political frustrations, right? Because there's a politics to all of this, which is citizens must be able to at least perceive that you are in tune with their pinch points and you're willing to do something about it. That is why, for me, I would say find a way to speak to the citizens.
All right, and thank you very much for your thoughts. And it's been an economic morning where we've tried to explain some of we've tried to bring better understanding, perhaps, and I hope we've succeeded in that for you, the viewers, and those who are listening to us as well, on the economic issues that Ghana is currently going through and the solutions that exist for us, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And I did that with Joe Jackson, Director of Operations at Delex Finance, Dr. John Osai-Kwapong, Fellow at CDD Ghana, Dr. Kwame Sapon-Siedu, who's a pharmacist and research fellow also at CDD, and Professor Tapepra, who's the Dean of the School of Economics, University of Cape Coast. Thank you very much. Franklin Kujo is President of Imani Africa. So thank you for your comments as well. That came through. Like I said, don't forget you can always catch playback on our YouTube channel, CitiTube, CITUBE. So you just go there, you subscribe, type in The Big Issue, and you find me there. So you can just watch again and enjoy, and do share the links as well. My name is Godfred Akoto Boafo. Have a good weekend.